undifferentiated entity. We now know that there's Broca's area and the prefrontal cortex, all these brain regions, right? So that even anatomically, let alone functionally, the brain is a differentiated entity. So why should the body be any different? So maybe there are many different kinds of bodies. Maybe there is one body which is the body of physics, which is literally the body that, what I call is the pushing body, right? Its primary, its prototypical capacity is to move stuff from A to B, whether it is moving itself or it's moving other things, right? So that's one kind of body. Another kind of body you might call is the pointing body, right? Which is to say that it's the coordinate, it's like the origin of coordinates. It's the thing relative to which other things are organized. So when I'm standing like this, I have a front-back axis. So the world is organized in this way, right? So there's an asymmetry between the front of my body and the back of my body. That doesn't come from the capacity of the body to move things. It comes from the fact that I have this axis of asymmetry, both top-down as well as front-back. So the pointing and the pushing bodies are not the same, though obviously they are tied to each other. Unfortunately, I can't show you that picture. So a good example of that, you might say, is you might have seen these picture-in-picture photographs, right? So there will be one large picture, let's say of Leonardo da Vinci or something, which will be made out of lots and lots of small pictures, each one of which is a painting by Leonardo, something like that. Okay? That's an example of a situation where you need a combination of pointing and pushing to really understand what's going on. Meaning, if you just take it at one glance, so through a pointing method, so just look at it, it feels like a painting of Leonardo. But it's clear that there is more detail, and as you go closer, you see the extra details emerge. And that's actually the way visual exploration happens, right? Or for that matter, auditory exploration. Which is, I don't see the whole in one glance. We saw that problem in the previous session where vision is not necessarily representational. I don't see all the details because I don't need to. So an embodied perspective would say that if your body can be used both to coordinatize the world and to push things from one location to another, those two bodies, if they interact, help you explore the world in a far more skillful manner than otherwise. Meaning, I only look, so going back to an optimality view, that somehow the way you experience the world has to be tied to getting what you need with as few resources as possible. So with one glance, I can figure out that I'm in a room. Now, I may be really upset that you're not paying attention and you're actually playing Angry Birds on your phone or sending SMSs to somebody. So if I'm really interested in that, I will look more carefully and I'll do that kind of visual exploration. And like when I was a student, I might, like my teacher would throw chalks at us. Right? So that kind of ongoing engagement. So once you move away from the body as a in perception, as a passive experiencer, and make it into this active explorer, you can see how you don't need to have this God's eye view of the world anymore. Instead, you go, you pick the thing that you want. If it's interesting, you pick some more things, and so on and so forth. It's like those, I'm sure you've seen these videos of chimpanzees using a stick to get ants out of an ant hill, of termites. So it's the same idea that the body is nothing, so vision in some sense is not that different from that stick. Sometimes you use that stick to poke, which is the pointing function. It's just revealing what's underneath. And sometimes you use it to dig. But it's only through poking that you can find out what you need to dig. And it's only through digging that you reveal features that you want to poke. So there's constant feedback between the coordinate geometry view of the body and and the physics view of the body is an interplay. But that's not everything. There's also the body as the body of experience. Because all of us experience the world in an embodied fashion. So which is to say, I am here and I see the world from out there. Right? I don't, again from a computational perspective, you might ask, why do you actually see the world from behind your eyes? So the MAR 3D model, suppose that your eyes recover a full 3D model of the world, it could have been possible that you have these eyes, but you experience the world from way out there like God. Right? So you just get this full 3D picture of the world that is moving around like Google Earth. Okay? But you don't. So there's something very specific about the bodily character of your own experience. You experience, so to give an Indian example, if you read the famous Mandakya Upanishad, you have these 4 states of experience, so to speak, right? Waking, I'm sort of blanking on the middle 2 suddenly, but you have dreamless sleep and you have full waking, and in the middle you have 2 more states of awareness, so to speak. So that state of awareness, each of them in some sense corresponds to a different kind of body. And why is that? It's because you could argue that the body is not something given. It's only if you think that the body is this stuff that is made only by physics, that there is this fixed body. Instead, imagine that for each task, so another extreme, for everything that you do, there is one kind of body. Right? So for grasping, there is one kind of body. For eating, there is another kind of body, and so on and so forth. It just happens to be that all of these bodies are layered on top of each other, and they seem to fit together most of the time. But of course, you can fool, again, any neuropsychologist will tell you that sometimes,
Would it be much better to call them as configurations of the same body but not different body? Different configurations?
What is the same there? That's what I'm trying to get to, which is, if you assume that it is the same body and you're taking it for granted, then the problem arises as to how do you explain when there are incoherences. So for example, if you have, hemispheric neglect, so you're only able to see things on the right hand side of your visual field but not on your left hand side. It's not a huge problem for a computationalist because they're just saying that something is not there in your brain or some stroke has happened and therefore you can't see this side and you can see that side, right? So right hemispheric neglect means there's a stroke in your left hand side, right, left hemisphere. But from an embodied cognition person, they can't use this explanation because if the body is the source of perception and cognition and most of the body is intact, then it's strange if a stroke makes you see things radically differently. So the challenges that an embodied cognition person faces are very different explanatorily, right? So therefore, instead you might say that there are body schema, so which overlap with each other and are very tightly correlated. So going back to Eleanor Roche, so one radical possibility is that the body is like a vortex, right? That the world itself comes primarily correlated. So dogs look like each other and cats look like each other. And cats look more like dogs and they look like lizards. But the closer you come to your own body, the more sort of unified it is, right? So the further you go from your body, the more differentiated the world is. So in that sense, the body is sort of the hub of all experience, right? This is where it is the most unified, and that's where it is sort of the most diffuse. Which is, of course, the classical idea of the self. Right? The self is, when if you look certainly at Indian philosophy, the idea is that it's the self that, in a sense, brings the world together. Okay? And therefore, this unified self is the thing that you need for the world itself to have any meaning. So if you didn't have a unified self, you wouldn't have a unified world. And this is a way of recasting the idea of innate knowledge or innate mental capacities.